Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week gives us the first of many R-rated comedies this summer, Neighbors, starring Seth Rogen and Zac Efron, a much smaller release for a niche crowd, Mom's Night Out, and Scarlett Johansson goes indie in Under the Skin. We also take a look at classic college party movies, and our triple feature gives us two animated films this week, new classic Madagascar 3, old classic from Joe, Mulan, and our Oscar A to Z film this week is All the King's Men. And as we had last week on the show, you can now hyperlink to whatever movie or part of the show you want to hear. Just go ahead and click the link in the description of the show, and you can go right to whatever movie you're most curious about. And speaking of movies that we talked about on last week's show, not really a news item per se, but The Amazing Spider-Man 2 just wrapped its second weekend and dropped a steep 61% to just a little bit over $35 million for its second weekend. A bit worse than any recent Marvel film, and much worse than some. Just wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts on this. I mean, we all gave it not super glowing reviews last week, but all in the positive. So what exactly is the problem? Is it the fatigue of the franchise, Joe?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I thought it was very good. I know some people really liked it. I know some people didn't. It's probably just because maybe people are just tired of Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're just tired of certain superhero franchises. Maybe it's just like people are so excited about certain things, like maybe the Marvel movies, and that just kind of overshadows some of the other projects.
Yeah, I mean, even though this is obviously a Marvel film, it's not part of the Marvel, quote-unquote, Marvel universe that the Avengers takes place in. Justin, what do you think?
I think it ultimately comes down to two things. The first being reviews themselves. We all like to think that if a critic pans a movie, it's not necessarily a death sentence, depending on what it is. But unfortunately, that happens more often than not in Hollywood. After Earth last summer seemed like it would have been a box office smash to me, and yet it got nearly universally panned, for good reason. Mm-hmm. But the evidence still shows. And with Amazing Spider-Man 2, we definitely saw many reviewers still give not necessarily glowing reviews much like us, but definitely not the blockbuster everyone was hoping it was going to be. The second thing I think that hurt this movie, but it's the fact of continuity. With the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're so used to the fact that every year we are going to get another Marvel movie. In August we're going to get Guardians of the Galaxy. Next summer we're going to get the Avengers 2. We as an audience never have to wait that long.
Well, we just had Captain America a month ago.
Exactly. And we always know that there's something coming next. With Spider-Man, with X-Men, we want to hope that there's going to be a sequel, but we're never getting like a straight allusion to, oh wait, this is coming up immediately following that.
Well, there's certainly nothing immediately following it, but I mean, Spider-Man 3 and 4 have been announced and are happening.
I thought,
not in the immediate future, but, in a couple of years.
I thought Spider-Man and X-Men are still trying to build their franchises and keep things going. There's definitely continuity, especially with X-Men.
Oh, make no mistake. I'm not denying that there's continuity. What I'm saying is there's not as much in-your-face continuity as there is with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is always moving. Phase 1, obviously, Phase 2, and Phase 3. I don't know how many phases there are going to be, but they're always seeming to want to advertise the next movie immediately after the last one has ended, which I think keeps audiences excited and hoping that the next one's going to be as good, if not better than the last one.
So you think part of it's just the amount of advertising that goes into it?
Pretty much. Like, obviously, we had our issues with Amazing Spider-Man 2's necessarily gimmick. I'm not going to talk too much about that. But obviously, they don't have the same following that the Avengers does and everything else. So they rely more on, okay, let's wait 2 years and then we'll show you something instead of let's allude to it right away.
I still think that means that the films can hold pretty well by themselves. They don't have to rely on all these other films to do it, which is one of the strengths of the Marvel Studios movies, but I'd also argue one of the weaknesses, especially since some of the more recent movies have been weaker.
Well, and if we're going to talk about other movies affecting the outcome, how much do you think the bad will from the first Amazing Spider-Man affects it. Because a lot of people really liked it. Joe, you and I were among them. But a lot of people also didn't like it.
First one was
like Justin, for example.
Very divided.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess I think that probably affected it. But I feel like it wouldn't really affect anybody on either side too much. If you didn't like it, you might not see it. If you really liked it, obviously you're going to see it. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know.
I was going to say, I mean, yes, I've met many person that, much like myself, were not the biggest fan of The Amazing Spider-Man, the reboot. But I don't think I've met a single person out of them who has said, like, oh, no, I would never watch Amazing Spider-Man 2 because of this one.
That's true.
So maybe not much.
Because, I mean, it wasn't... I think even you, Justin, you didn't like it, but you didn't think it was terrible.
Oh, no, I mean, I wasn't willing to throw in the towel on the franchise as a whole. It was just... I mean, it's still... I was rather unimpressed with the first installment.
It's kind of like... Well, you'd think with Spider-Man, people know there's a lot of ways you can go. There's a lot of story there. Mm-hmm. So, I feel like if you like the character, you're going to go see his movie. People saw the Green Lantern movie, and a lot of people didn't like that. They still went to see it, even after they heard the bad reviews.
Well, that is true. Yeah, I feel like superhero movies are sort of in that pantheon of, as Justin sort of mentioned, critic-proof movies.
It's because...
I mean, Transformers,
yeah.
Fast and Furious.
I mean, it's like the fan base is strong enough that, you know, even if they know, they've heard it's bad, they still feel connected to it. They're going to support it and give it a chance.
Right.
You know, no matter how they feel about it.
All right. Well, again, all three of us gave it positive reviews. Not super, super glowing, but all in the positive. So if you have not seen Amazing Spider-Man yet, I would say go for it, because it may not be out that much longer at this point.
Yeah, I'd say definitely catch it if you haven't already.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move into this week's brand new releases, and first up is Neighbors. Justin's going to tell us about that.
Kelly, played by Rose Byrne, and Mac, played by Seth Rogen, are a couple enjoying their quiet life when they discover that their new neighbors next door are going to be the fraternity Delta Psi, led by Teddy, played by Zac Efron. However, after Teddy's frat house antics push Kelly and Mac to their breaking point, they start to retaliate by pranking Delta Psi and initiating a feud between the two. When it comes to college movies, wild parties are inevitable. It ultimately comes down to one question: is it funny? In regards to Neighbors, the answer is passionate, but not always, yes. Watching the absolute mayhem between the two clashing lifestyles is very scattershot, but when it hits the right notes, it's absolute comedy gold. That said, Neighbors has a relatively big flaw, perhaps not noticeable now, but in a couple years. It's dated. Outside of the wild antics, the film relies very heavily on pop culture references for its humor, as well as wordplay, which, while witty, often goes on slightly too long. Neighbors is definitely one of the funnier movies in 2014, but not likely to become the next Animal House, and I give it a B.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying with the dated nature, some of it. A lot of it is... The pop culture references are sort of classic, though. I mean, they reference a lot of, like, older movies, like we saw in the preview, the Robert De Niro Party. I mean, those are sort of timeless movies. I'm trying to think of any other, like,
Batman.
Exact...
Batman.
Yeah, the Batman stuff.
Like,
Though I will admit, the Michael Keaton-Nolan Batman comparison was pretty awesome.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was a good bit
so
in the
your
movie.
Batman's like...
I mean, truth be told, a Michael Keaton Batman reference is probably already dated.
I like that, actually.
You know, I liked it too, but I don't think the majority of people under, say, 20 have seen that, the Michael Keaton version of Batman.
That's true. Some people might not have actually gotten that, like, who's Michael Keaton?
Right. Even still, Neighbors is easily the funniest all-live-action film of the year. It makes the most of not only a great lead cast, but from some of the fun supporting roles and cameos as well, including Ike Barinholtz from TV's The Mindy Project as the best friend of Rogan and Byrne, and Lisa Kudrow as the school dean. Some of the jokes don't quite land. Some seem like an excuse to do some SNL-type skits, like when the three I just mentioned lapse into some celebrity impressions. And there are also a few times when the film will go up to 2 minutes without a single laugh. But a lot of the jokes are great, and even the ones we saw 100 times in the previews are either changed or extended here to give the audience something they haven't seen, no matter how many times they saw the preview. And kudos to Universal's marketing team for continuing to get the word out on their movies this year with these clear premises up front and showing us a lot of what we'll get in the movie, but not giving away the whole thing, and getting butts in seats like they've done with Ride Along and Non-Stop, both of which also debuted at number 1. Neighbors is likely not going to be my favorite R-rated comedy this year, with so many appealing ones still to come, but it's a big step up from the ones we've gotten recently, and I also give Neighbors a B. Joe?
The best thing about this movie are the two main cast members. Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne have decent chemistry, and they are charismatic enough to keep the humor going. Sadly, the big problem is the fact that most of the humor is not that original, and relies on Rogen's reactionary shtick. Efron's story seems really mixed, and not enough time is used to develop that message of growing up, which seems a bit tacky, tacked on, and underdeveloped. Really, the movie is very by the numbers, and the humor is very hit or miss. If you really like Seth Rogen, it's worth seeing. Otherwise, it's worth skipping. C+.
I would agree with that. It's a very Rogen-type comedy-heavy movie. Like, if you thought This Is the End was hilarious, the be-all, end-all of last year, then okay. If you don't like either the hardcore language, the hardcore sex jokes, the hardcore pot jokes, you probably might want to stay away from that. That's a good point.
But I mean, at the same time, that can be said for just about any frat movie ever made. I mean, it kind of comes with the territory.
It's not just the frat stuff I'm talking about, though. I thought the frat stuff was kind of the weakest part of the movie, personally. And I thought Seth Rogen, in terms of his comedy, I've seen him do a lot better. Mm-hmm. Like, but by his standards, this was pretty average.
I really think the standout of the movie is Rose Byrne. She's
down.
Hysterical. Mm-hmm. And we saw some of her comedic chops in Bridesmaids, and she's done, a few things here or there, but she's also a popular dramatic actress, so we don't always get to see quite this side of her. And
I still have yet to see Bridesmaids, so I didn't know she was in that.
Yeah, yep. she plays actually the nemesis in the film.
Oh, really?
And she's got some really good interplay with Kristen Wiig. But yeah, a lot of people know her from either The Insidious, Damages, The Glenn Close Show. But here, I mean, she's really going all out. And you are right, the interplay between the two of them is great. I did think the frat stuff was like real hit or miss. Either I thought those were the times where it lagged in the laughs for me the most.
It dragged a little bit.
Whenever they were exclusively in the frat house and Rogen and Byrne weren't on screen.
That's my biggest problem with it. I thought that some of those scenes really didn't work for me.
I think for me it was just a matter of we got a decent amount of Zac Efron. We got a decent amount of his buddy Pete, played by Dave Franco. But just about everybody else in the fraternity is
useless
/ underdeveloped. Like,
McLovin was there.
Scooney, played by McLovin.
Yeah, he didn't have much to do.
Had nothing to do, and I think there could have been a couple interesting angles to take with his character. I guess. That stuff was the most boring to me, though, so I don't know if I would have wanted to see them flesh that stuff out. But, I mean, also couldn't hurt with the collective parts. Like, Neighbors works at its best when the ensemble is working together for the comedy, not when it's one person's individual show.
I agree with that. I don't think it's ever one person's show, though, because it's either Byrne and Rogen and their friends,
or Efron,
or the frat, or Efron and the gang. It only really does that with Efron a little bit. I think he's the only one that gets any sort of separate storyline from everything else.
Well, yeah.
And I agree with Joe. It was a little bit tacked on.
I mean, if I liked it, I just wish they had done more with it. I thought it could have been a stronger story, and it was just kind of like, you got to learn to grow up. We'll have about 2 or 3 scenes devoted to that, and then I'll learn my lesson after going to jail or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what quite happened.
Yeah, that end was a bit of an issue for me.
Speaking of the end, I just thought there were about 3 different endings. I thought the event happens at the end of the movie, and then, Rogen and Byrne are back in their house putting the baby to bed, and then there's 3 more scenes after that. I thought that would have been a good place to end, and then they could do the calendar shoot stuff over the credits.
Which would probably be even funnier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see the need to have the 3 separate kind of endings.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It didn't really end as soon as it probably could have.
Yeah. I do feel like maybe if this had been a stronger year for comedy, I would give it a B-, because I really did debate whether or not it deserves that B. But I just thought we've been pretty starved. I did laugh a lot. So I'm willing to sort of forgive some of those flaws.
I mean, it's one of the better comedies that's come out, but I mean...
Not much to compare to, though.
Exactly.
No, but I mean, I don't know. Well, you know what, though? It makes sense, because we graded Ride Along about the same distance apart. I think you gave Ride Along a C-, I gave it a C+. If I'm going to give Ride Along a C+,
Neighbors
probably deserves a B.
Well,
if I'm being honest.
Well, Your Neighbors is better than Ride Along.
Yeah. I mean, in postscript, I believe, bump Ride Along down to a C, because I did see it a second time after we did the podcast.
It's not really that good.
It's not that good. But,
I mean, Kevin Hart's pretty funny.
Kevin Hart is pretty funny. All right, well, up next is Mom's Night Out, and this is a comedy with a splash of Christian values. And in the film, Sarah Drew plays Allison, a stay-at-home blogger mom who is at the end of her OCD rope with her 3 crazy kids and a husband who travels for work and is rarely around, played by Sean Astin. She decides to plan a mom's night with 2 of her fellow moms, played by Patricia Heaton and Andrea Logan White, while the husbands watch all the kids. Of course, everything that can go wrong does, and quickly the night turns into a nightmare, including trips to the hospital, a tattoo parlor, the police station, and a wild goose chase to find Allison's baby nephew, whose sister-in-law Bridget, played by Abby Cobb, leaves with her ex.
So, Dan, it's basically Married Moms Club.
Yeah, it sort of borrows a couple of the ideas from Single Moms Club.
Okay.
That's not wrong. But look, Mom's Night Out wasn't made for any of us sitting here on the podcast, so let's get that out of the way first. Joe didn't even end up seeing it. It is almost exclusively for moms and dads everywhere who feel like they can't get a moment's peace. But that being said, it's still fairly poorly written and poorly acted, with a few exceptions, notably Trace Atkins as tattoo artist Bones, who I liked. Patricia Heaton's bizarre accent goes in and out the entire movie, and I'm still not really sure what accent she was even going for. And the whole put upon mother bit has already been done to perfection by Heaton herself in the hit sitcoms Everybody Loves Raymond and The Middle, so having her in the film as well seems almost redundant. However, all of that being said, I think the movie's target audience will find this mostly entertaining and funny, and they'll probably see some realistic, if exaggerated, situations. They've all been done better in other films and TV shows, but they'll like what they see for the most part, so for that, I leave Mom's Night Out with a D+. Justin?
There's truly nothing more frustrating when a comedy comes out that seems like everyone involved was having a great time putting it together, but the end product does not reflect that at all. Mom's Night Out means well, but it's so seen before, and has so many obnoxious Christian undertones, that none of this really hits home. The narrative leaves nothing to the imagination, and it is painfully predictable at times, but the most infuriating aspect of Mom's Night Out stems from the protagonists themselves. While the nervousness and paranoid nature, given the outrageous events that unfold in the film, are understandable, they often come across as more annoying than funny. It also does not help that by the end of the film, it seems to be heavily implying a message that sets feminism back decades, and I give it a D.
I actually thought you were going to fail it, Justin.
No, I mean, there were a couple stray moments where I did find stuff funny. I wouldn't say it's laugh out loud funny like the audience saw with.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, you have to admit, there were several times when the theater, roared with laughter. They weren't particularly things in the movie that I found funny. I found certain other things funny. But there were several times when the theater, erupted with laughter.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it wasn't the case because, as you mentioned in your review, the writing for this movie is bad. I mean, there's no way around it.
No, it is. But as I also mentioned in the review, it's not made for anyone sitting here. I think the people that went, well, like I mentioned when we sat down, I think maybe one other guy came in, but there were only 2 guys sitting in the theater out of, I don't know, probably 70 or 80 people. It was a pretty big theater.
Oh, yeah.
A pretty full theater, I should say. And we were among the few guys. So obviously it's, for the moms out there that sort of feel this frustrated way, it's a tricky thing to sort of suss out, okay, well, it's horrible, but its intended audience is really going to enjoy it. I mean, I talked to somebody the next night that had just come from seeing it that said, it was hilarious, the funniest thing they've seen all year. So obviously it hits that segment in the right way.
Which it does, but also begs the question of, okay, just because it's hitting one audience relatively well, does that excuse its atrocious writing, really bad acting, and mediocre humor?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I still think that, one of the main goals of a film is to satisfy its audience. And if it does that, it does something right.
No, I mean, it's definitely hitting the target audience. I'll grant you that. But I don't think that's an excuse. I don't think that should serve as a crush to give it to necessarily give it a better grade.
Justin, it's kind of the classic Medea argument. It's terrible, but it's made for a specific group of people that might love it.
Or Need for Speed, for that matter.
Or Need for
Which
Speed.
we talked about earlier this year.
I didn't think was that bad. It's dumb and was, simple kind of to fill that void for Fast and Furious. But if you know what you're getting into, it's got that certain goal to meet, does it really make it a badly done movie?
Right.
It's a depending question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky line. Obviously, I gave it a D+. I'm not saying it's a good movie. It's not a good movie. It's not a well-made movie. But obviously, people that it is meant for are tuned into it. I didn't find the Christian overtones unbearable like you did. I mean, it was... Going into it, I think the audience generally knew it was a Christian film, so I'm not sure.
Did you see any of that in the trailer, though?
I didn't know.
I don't think I saw any. Maybe I saw one trailer for it because I remember seeing Patricia Heaton. So I can't answer that question.
It was marketed as a comedy.
It is a comedy.
It is, but then they decided to stick in all these awful, lazy, preachy Christian undertones that plague the entire second and third act, and it's just completely.
I don't think they really show up
unnecessary.
until the end.
Oh no,
The last 20 minutes.
They're there. I mean,
well, okay. To be fair, Patricia Heaton is a pastor's wife, and the pastor is in the film. So yes, obviously here and there you get some of it, but they don't really start hitting the point home until they're in the police station and Bones is talking to Allison.
it's still preachy and obnoxious, and
Okay, well, I have to ask then, how can a Christian film win with you? Because God's Not Dead, Son of God, Grace Unplugged from last year, where's the line where you say, okay, the message is well received, it's done well. Have you ever seen one?
what we've seen thus far for Film Fanatics has been the bulk of my Christian film viewing experiences. I can't speak to Fireproof or anything else.
All right, well, let me ask you then.
circa
What
that.
would you like to see that you're not seeing in any of these films? Obviously, Heaven is for Real is a bit of an exception. We all gave that sort of an average grade, average to positive grade.
I thought it was decent,
Yeah.
personally.
I mean, I think I gave it a B- maybe. You gave it a B, I believe.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Justin, you
C.
probably right there. Yes. Okay. C.
Which is
That's
better
still
than-
lower than.
It's passable.
Yeah, which is far more can be said for anything else Christian oriented that we've
But
watched.
it's still an average grade.
It is.
So
There are a couple things to answer your question. I think that they would need to win with me. First, they need an actually legit script. Every single Christian movie we've seen thus far has not had that. Heaven is for Real was close, but not close enough. Two, this is also an exception to Heaven is for Real. They need actual people who know how to act. Because these companies are so independent, I feel like they're literally hiring people off the street. And it shows.
I don't know, they got
It painfully shows.
But Justin, they got Samwise Gamgee.
yeah, I mean, listen. This movie has Sean Astin and Patricia Heaton,
Right.
who are both name stars. I'm not saying they're A-listers,
But they're known.
but they're known.
Which brings me back to point one. They need a legit script, which Mom's Night Out, I believe we both agree, does not have.
I agree with that, but I don't think any of its problems even remotely stem from the Christian aspect of it. So I guess that's
And
what I'm asking.
Number three, and this is the most important one, and it's part of the reason all these movies have been getting D's from me, they need to stop making their agenda so obnoxiously open. Like, Gimme Shelter was on the right track. Like, you didn't really feel the agenda until probably like the last couple minutes. I mean, they did a really good job of masking it. There were still a ton of other problems with that movie.
Sure.
But it was at least doing a better job of not feeling so beating you over the head with his agenda. It turns filmmaking essentially into propaganda, which I consider an obnoxious blasphemy of what filmmaking should be.
I guess I feel like, though, I mean, to me, that's like saying Fast and Furious movies shouldn't point out that cars are cool. I mean, it's a Christian movie. I don't, Joe, now I know you didn't see Mom's Night Out, but you saw some of these other films, so you can get in on this conversation.
I think what Justin's trying to say is that these overtly Christian movies that are made by Christian studios with these big agendas, they typically just are trying to sell the agenda more than they are trying to tell a genuinely good story. And I think they're more about pushing the agenda than the story, so it makes the script suffer. And I also think they probably have lesser budgets, too, and lesser resources. Why do they make
very small budgets for a lot of these.
Lesser quality movies
Right.
a lot of times. Plus, I mean, the people behind it aren't necessarily great writers or filmmakers. They're, hardcore Christians who want to push an agenda by using a movie. And I think they're trying to do something genuinely good. But on one hand, Justin, you got to remember, though, at the end of the day, you got to remember who's making the movie. I mean, these are hardcore Christians trying to sell an agenda, the best way they can using the medium, at least the best way they think they can. And maybe they're still learning and they've got a ways to go. But, so, I mean, I don't know. You got to take that into account. Like, yeah, I feel like most of those movies aren't really the greatest quality. But once again, I feel like there's a lot of people that go into those movies, like, once again, the right audience, that are going to love it, and if it's a movie for them, it might not be perfect, but at least it's satisfying the audience, so.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm not denying that the target audience won't probably leave satisfied, but still, narratively, it's a mess. Stylistically, it's not even worth mentioning. And entertainment-wise, it's just frustrating because, as you put it, it's not really so much story with them as much as it is. I literally feel like half the time watching these movies that I'm not really watching a movie. I feel like I'm watching a 90-minute sermon that's filmed.
Mom's Night Out was not like that at all. I'll give you God's Not Dead on that. Mom's Night Out, like I said, it really only hits the point home at the very, final few minutes of the film.
I'm actually very surprised to hear that it was a Christian movie, because the one trailer I saw, it didn't, demonstrate that at all.
No, which I think is completely manipulative.
That's very strange. I thought it was marketed as just a mainstream comedy that didn't have, a religious audience.
Truth be told, if they had at least addressed that a bit more in the trailers, I might have given it a D+.
I think it's funny you guys picked the most interesting things to have debates about. You guys gave it relatively the same grade.
Yeah, but my dislike for the movie had nothing to do with any of that. It was just not a good script.
And on that, we can definitely agree.
There's nothing else I can say about that. All right, well, let's move on next to Under the Skin, and Joe's going to tell us about that.
Under the Skin is a science fiction film directed by Jonathan Glazer, starring Scarlett Johansson. Johansson plays a creature inhabiting the body of a beautiful woman who stalks various men and tries to lure them with sexual favors. She then traps them in a vat of liquid where their skin is harvested along with her mysterious associate. After trying to seduce a deformed man, she seems to be finally feeling some remorse for her actions and attempts to become more human by eating food and being romantic. The film is beautifully shot and edited with impressive sound design. It creates a haunting atmosphere, which is probably the most disturbing artistic film I've ever seen. The story seems interesting as well, especially when you learn what's actually going on. I don't want to give this away, though, since there is no real clean mention of the plot from the novel it's based on, which gives it a very different experience. This makes the story seem to be more of an artistic journey with many open interpretations. It's very thought-provoking and bone-chilling. In many ways, it does get under the skin. This leads to a big possible issue, though. Though I think the film is very well made, I think that it's difficult to say if it's entertaining for everybody. It's supposed to be disturbing, though, so I don't think I can lightly recommend it to most audiences. Still, I think there's something strangely beautiful in this one, and I give it a B-.
All right, well, Justin, how about Under the Skin?
It's hard to exactly put into words my reaction to Under the Skin, largely due to the very aspect that makes it both interesting and frustrating. Its ambiguity. Much of the film has no dialogue and a great deal of mystery that gets left to the imagination of the viewer. Some will decidedly find this boring and confusing, but others will view it as a dark, disturbing arthouse sci-fi thriller posing the big question of what it means to be human. I found myself torn between the two extremes of the overall film, admiring the big questions and the chilling cinematography, but also feeling the repetitive nature of the film and scenes running on for way too long. It's not an easy film to watch, let alone reflect on, but from a stylistic angle, there's quite a bit to like about this one, and a potentially interesting story to dissect about what exactly may be going on. But as a whole, Under the Skin throws many things at the viewer, but not much to put them together, and I give it a C.
Okay. Well, I think we all know that of the three of us on the show, I'm the one that doesn't really get into the surreal and avant-garde kind of stuff, but as we've been doing the show, I have appreciated the more nuanced elements of these films more, like in Wings of Desire, or recent Oscar A to Z, all that jazz. Under the Skin, however, is a real chore to get through for somebody with my kind of taste. For one thing, half the movie feels like it's in slow motion. Shots are lingered on about 3 or 4 times longer than they need to be. And even by the reveal at the end, much of the movie fails to make a ton of sense. Johansson's performance is decent for what she needs to do, and I definitely understand an actor of her stature wanting to do these indie projects and branch out of the more typical fare, but Under the Skin is just a snooze. You guys both hit on my biggest issues with it, between the pacing and the, Justin mentioned there's not very much dialogue in it, and which is fine. I mean, I really liked Drive, for example, which is a very minimal sort of script, but this one just did not connect with me at all. Recommended for only the ultra artsy crowd, and it does get an F.
I mean, I feel like for style alone, you gotta. I don't think you could say it's a failure. I might have to argue with you on that
I
one.
definitely debated giving it a D, and by year's end, depending on what's in the F column, I may do that. But I'm sorry, and I said this when we talked about, I believe it was Wings of Desire.
Uh-huh.
I feel like for a short film purpose, for a half hour, fine. You be as artsy as you want. You do these great shots. I'm sort of tired of giving a movie the benefit of the doubt just because it looks good. I would say this is probably the most boring movie that I've seen all year, and that includes all of our triple feature movies. It was such a slog to get through. Now I will say, Justin and I saw this on a double feature.
Oh.
Not that either of them were long. The other one we're going to be talking about on next week's show, Dom Hemingway, which is only about 90 minutes. And this one is about the same, about an hour and a half. So there's a possibility that maybe that affected it, but I really just wasn't into it. And I think you both kind of hit on that it's really for a very specific crowd. And I think we all know I'm not the crowd.
No. If you didn't enjoy it, that's understandable. I didn't expect you to.
Yeah,
But, I mean, I don't know. I was pretty into it. I mean, I definitely see the flaws, but it did something pretty well. It honestly has probably made more of an impact on me than any other movie this year.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, it disturbed me greatly, but in terms of an emotional impact...
Did it all make sense to you?
I knew what the general plot was like trying to do, but in terms of what was actually like literally going on, I thought it was like mostly just sort of this metaphorical dream journey, which I like. So it's more of a fluid consciousness thing. Mm-hmm. But then I thought, I want to look it up, and it actually is based on a novel, and there's a lot more going on there. So in a way, I'm like, okay, there was kind of a consistent narrative. It was just done in a very strange and very nightmarish way, but it really did follow the basic plot of what it was based on, so it was just a very interesting interpretation. So,
okay.
But I thought it was interesting they left out the certain actual plot elements to kind of give you like a different interpretation. So,
well, let me ask you this:
and I like that. Uh-huh.
Do you think reading the book? Obviously, you haven't read the book, but I mean, certainly, I didn't even know it was based on a book until this podcast. But if I were to read the book, do you think I would appreciate the movie more?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Because
I thought there were a lot of things that just didn't get touched on. Like, once the big reveal hits, it's like, okay, but that still doesn't explain X, Y, Z, and 1, 2, 3.
Because I've got a feeling it's one of those things where there's a lot going on in, like, the characters' minds that they just left out. They just left out. It's like you're looking outside, and you only see what, no pun intended, skin deep. We're only seeing the surface of what's going on.
Okay.
So, whether the director wanted to try and use that to tell, like, a bigger story, they kind of took some of the sci-fi elements out, but left it going in. So, like, what seemed kind of surreal was something that was actually happening.
Okay.
Which I think, personally, takes away from it a little bit, because, there's very interpretations of what you can look into that and say, oh, wow, like, we're seeing her kill these people, but we're actually seeing them stripped down in another way on some level. I just like the fact there are many different ways you can look at it, and it makes you think. And, I mean, it might be a while, but I could take a look at this film again and maybe even give it a higher grade.
Okay.
I know it got a lot of high praise.
It did. It was very critically well received, but these movies usually are. I mean, Spring
True.
Breakers got a 70% or something on
'Cause
Rotten
it's
Tomatoes.
different, yeah.
I don't know a single soul that saw that movie and enjoyed it.
I still have yet to see it.
So, it's like, that's
Well,
kind of where I am with
No,
it.
I understand, but actually, I'll tell you this much. Like, the movie left such an impact on me that I wanted to go research it for this podcast, and, like, I actually was interested in the book, and I thought, if I read the book, and if I like it, maybe it'll give me another perspective on the film, and it'll give me another angle. So I was interested, and...
Well, and I'll give you this, Joe. Just always talking to you about these kind of films gives me a different perspective on it anyway.
Well,
because
I'm glad.
you always offer up a lot of ideas that I don't necessarily either think about or you think differently than I do about certain things.
Well, like I said, I like to look at things from different perspectives. I like it when it's not always a straightforward narrative, and I admit that might be frustrating for some people, but I think that's one of the cool things about film. That's why I like the surreal and the avant-garde arts, because I think that if we all just do movies the same way, they cease to be art.
Right.
So, I liked Under the Skin. I think that there's an audience for it.
Oh, I think there's definitely an audience for it. But, like you said, I mean, you kind of knew going into this, that audience is not going to be me.
I doubted it.
Yeah.
But I did think, I agree with you completely. I thought Scarlett Johansson did a good job as usual.
She did. Yeah. Boy, she's really grown on me in the last maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, she's a good actress.
Yeah. All right, well, moving on, we have our home media moment for this week. That is The Past, and Justin's going to tell us about that. Joe, you know what? Before we move on, I am going to give Under the Skin a D. I don't think it deserves to be in the same group of the Fs that we've had this year.
Like Vampire Academy or something.
Any of them. Hercules, Vampire Academy.
Like, at least this one offers something.
The Quiet Ones, even. It's better than The Quiet Ones, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. You really
Same
didn't
grade
like
from Justin for both, so I guess,
Okay.
he gave that one a C as well.
All right.
But
That makes me happy you didn't fail it. Okay.
No, and like I said, talking to you, we try not to say too much to each other after we see these movies before the podcast, because I think it's better if we kind of get it all out on the air here.
Hey, fresh perspective.
So, yeah, like even when Justin and I go to see the movies together, we don't really talk about it afterwards.
That's good. Justin and I can't always see the same.
Well, no, when you guys go, it's usually the gab hour afterwards, but that's fine too.
But I mean, it goes back and forth. Like,
We had a great conversation about Enemy afterwards.
I just sort of like to be surprised, I guess, when we do the show. I mean, I sort of have a general idea of what you guys are going to think of a movie, but
I started with you.
I agree,
know.
but I have been surprised by your grades. Like, actually, to be honest, I thought your grade for what was it, Mom's Night Out, I thought was actually higher than I thought it was.
I thought you were going to fail it, for sure.
Yeah, I thought you were going to fail it, too.
We've got The Past now with Justin.
All right, here we go. After leaving for 4 years, Ahmed, played by Ali Musafa, returns to France to finalize his divorce with his eventual ex-wife, Marie, played by Berenice Bejo, only to find that Marie has been in a relationship with Samir, played by Tahar Rahim, whose own wife is in a coma, and has to deal with the unfortunate reality that she has moved on without him. What's made the two films I have seen from director Asghar Farhadi so compelling is his infectious talent to offer intense dramatic, wait for it, Joe, beats with a hard-hitting subject matter. It doesn't necessarily make for easy watching, but it does truly showcase the talent of his leads, notably from Bejo. The Past really does a great job of providing a scenario and viewing it from a variety of different perspectives, but that also becomes part of the problem. Due to all this going on, the film's overall pace does feel a little bit flimsy, but when it works, it's gut-punchingly gripping. The Past is not quite on par with the great storytelling provided from his Oscar winner Separation, but still provides a well-acted, realistic story deserving of a watch, and I give it a B+.
All right. Well, as you guys know, when we revealed our top 5 foreign language films a few weeks ago, Farhadi's A Separation was my number 1 of all time, so I was very excited to see the follow-up in The Past, and it did not disappoint. I wouldn't call it quite near flawless like I would A Separation, but Farhadi is clearly drawn to these stories with rich characters, family dynamic struggles, and he said, she said intrigue, and The Past does all of this incredibly well. The acting by Bejo, nominated for her work in The Artist, is the clear standout, but really everyone is good. It gets a bit convoluted and clocking in at over 2 hours, a bit long in the tooth by the end, but The Past is another worthy addition to the canon, and I give it an A-. Joe, what did you think of The Past?
It's kind of funny. You guys pretty much just stole my reviews. So
Is that right?
Yeah, like no, really. Like it pretty much sums up how I felt about it. I will say when it came to Separation, I thought it was a good movie, but I remember that I had some pacing issues with it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it quite as much as you guys. So, as I kind of expected, I thought this one was also very good. And it kind of, I feel like it's kind of more of the same with this guy. Like he knows what he's good at. It's a very specific type of story. So I kind of felt like, in a way, I was getting more of the same, but not quite as good. I thought it was well done. I really like the close-knit camera work, how it brings like this very human, realistic portrayal. Like it seems like you're really there with these people. And I think that the key word for him is humanity. Like these are very real stories. And that's the strength, is the script and just the tight close-knitness of the acting. It's well done. But once again, the pacing kind of kept me from being drawn in all the time. I thought it was a bit long, and I didn't think it was quite as good as the last one, but it was still good. And like Justin, I'm going to give it a B+.
Yeah, I didn't feel it with The Separation, but I did in this one. By the probably like hour and 45-minute mark, I was like, all right, there's still about 20 minutes left of this, and I'm pretty much set with these characters.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued to see him branch out a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And do maybe not a family story next time.
That's kind of what I hoped for. Like, I'm just waiting for like the next one to be like the adopted father.
Right. Right.
Okay, like
a big change of pace.
Like, can
it's
we just
all still in the family.
do like a thriller or an action
Yeah.
movie or something? Just mix it up.
I'm okay if he still even does a drama, just maybe spread out a little bit from the family.
Yeah, like
Do, you know...
like a romantic issue
romance or workplace or...
something.
Focus on marriage instead of divorce.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's true. You're right. Both of these
Divorce
family
again.
issues have been like of the split up kind of nature.
Maybe he's like speaking from some personal experience. That's why he tells the story so well. But I think he can start to get out of his comfort zone. If we get a third movie that's like kind of the same thing, I'll be like getting a little tired of it.
Right.
You know?
Like The Past, you can kind of let it slide.
All right. You know.
I definitely don't fault you for taking that angle, because for the most part you're right. For me, it's more or less of a matter of, Farhadi does this aspect so well that I don't mind it, and the fact that he's just taking another area of that and exploring it in a different way, I'm okay with it. I mean, do I want him to do every movie in that general field? No. And I really hope he does branch out with his next one. I know he's made movies before Separation, but I unfortunately have not seen them.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's his Oscar winner. Obviously, that's his crowning achievement.
Yeah, I agreed.
All right, well, let's move on. We have our top 5 this week, and in honor of Neighbors, it is the top 5 college party movies, and we'll start with Joe for that.
All right, my number 5 is Road Trip. It's just some of my favorite actors from this time period. I thought it was kind of a well-defined comedy for the time period that it came out. I enjoyed Road Trip. Number 4 is kind of connected to Road Trip. It's Euro Trip. This one really tops the original for me. Well, Road Trip, I think, has a lot of good laughs. I think Euro Trip just completely supersedes it. It's dumb, but it's enjoyable. It sits comfortably at number 4. Number 3 is American Pie 2. Like, all the characters from the original American Pie return, but this time they're in college. And I'll be honest, upon reflection, I think I found this one funnier than the original. I actually really liked the dynamic of this one. I thought the characters grew a lot more. And I just liked the situational humor of it a lot. I liked it. I thought it kind of topped it personally. Number 2, this will be the big upset, is Animal House. Yes. There's some great actors, some awesome jokes, and it really sets the trope for many of the comedies to come. But despite its greatness, doesn't quite make my number 1.
Interesting. All right. Well, I've only seen American Pie 2 once, and it was in theaters, so I didn't put it on the list. But I do remember liking it about as much as the original, which I've seen many times. But I don't know why I've never revisited American Pie 2. But, you know.
3?
3 I've actually never seen, and then 4 I saw, which was, like, okay.
I never saw 4, but I like American Wedding as well.
I've heard that's a good one. I own the whole trilogy pack. I should sit down with that one day and just do a marathon.
On a side note, for American Wedding, I liked it a lot. I think it was a very funny movie as well. Probably about on par with the other ones. My big problem with it was, though, I forget the character's name. The football player?
Mm-hmm. Chris Klein.
But yeah, he didn't come back in the third one.
No, there were a few people absent from the third one, and that may be why I just never ended up seeing it. But
and his girlfriend, I liked their plot line. I thought their romance was probably the best, and I thought they were pretty good characters, and they were just absent. And I thought that was the big weakness for them.
Yeah, that
you know what I mean? Like,
was kind of a bummer, I'm sure.
Like the other ones were
because I liked him a lot,
more for laughs, and he was like the nice guy that was actually kind of having like a more relatively serious romance.
Right.
So,
well, good list so far.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my number 5 is PCU. This is a 1994 comedy with some early favorites: Jeremy Piven, Jon Favreau in early roles, David Spade's here. And the thing you really need for a good college party movie is the villain, the dean, whoever. In this case, it's the president of the school, and it's played by Jessica Walter, who Arrested Development fans will know as Lucille. Now, I saw this movie 20 years before, or 15 years before Arrested Development was in existence, but she was just fantastic as the dean. If you've never seen PCU, I would recommend that one. My number 4 is Accepted, an early Jonah Hill role, of course. Really his big breakout, I would say. And another great comedic performance from Lewis Black in Accepted, one of my favorite stand-ups. Number 3 for me is Animal House. Not a huge Belushi fan, but I gave this one a go because we were doing the college party movies. So many quotable lines. I mean, I knew a lot of them, but
hey, did something right.
But you know what? It's funny. It's one of those. What was the movie we saw with you, Joe? Where you In Bruges, where we kept seeing these lines, and you were like, "Oh, that's from this." Like, I knew a lot of the lines were from Animal House, but then some lines came up. I was like, "Oh, that's what that's from." So yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. And he wasn't actually in it as much as I thought he was. I guess from the legend, I thought he was the star of it.
He's more of like a big side character.
Yeah. And I can see how, other than Saturday Night Live, it was his like big breakout.
Yeah.
Because obviously they give him a lot of the more humorous things to do.
Hey, classic Snow as well.
Yes, that is true. Donald Sutherland as the professor.
Revealed backside and everything.
Very good. All right, and my number 2 is Back to School. This is a Rodney Dangerfield film from the 80s, really one of his comeback movies when his career started reviving itself in the 1980s. Very, very funny movie. I mean, it's silly, but it's silly in, like, the right way, if that makes sense. Like, it's stupid. But let me put it to you like this. Like, Roger Ebert compared it to, like, a Marx Brothers movie. Like, it's stupid, but it's stupid in an intelligent way.
Yeah.
Like, it's well-written stupidity.
Yeah, that some people would consider, like, South Park like that. Like, it's dumb, but it's usually speaking to something intelligent.
Right. Justin always references Dumb and Dumber as well for a smartly written, stupid comedy. And for me, Back to School is that. And I'm a huge Rodney Dangerfield fan. One of my favorite stand-ups, so...
Not that familiar with him.
Really? He's the one who does I Don't Get Any Respect. Do you ever hear that? Any Respect? Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's dead now, but...
Oh.
In the 80s, he sort of had a George Burns-type revival. Like around the same time, and they were around the same age. Like, he was probably...
I didn't know he was that old.
He wasn't quite as old as Burns, but he was probably in his late 60s when he did Back to School.
Yeah, what's up with that? George Burns was, like, big in the 30s, and then he just popped up in the 70s
like, his TV show in the 50s, and then, like, late 70s,
Boom.
his career,
like,
exploded.
Like, what?
Yeah. But, same thing with Dangerfield for some reason. I don't know.
Interesting.
All right, Justin, let's hear your 5 through 2 for the college party movies.
Number 5, American Pie 2. Essentially, it's a rehash of American Pie 1, but it's one of those sequels that just takes the material and amps it up twofold, and it's so much funnier for it.
Yep.
And I think this is really just the last really good American Pie movie. Wedding was okay. Reunion happened.
And then
it was nice to see him again, but I really wish it was better.
Me too.
But
don't forget all the DVDs.
Oh, yeah.
We don't count those.
Non-canon as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, just a really fun way to take the antics to college. Number 4 is Old School, which poses the big question of what's life like after the frat house life ends. And I thought it was just a brilliant pairing of Vince Vaughn, yes, I did say it, Dan, and Will Ferrell.
I mean, it's one of his best movies, so I'm fine with that.
And although I thought it did take a little bit to get going, I thought the payoff was very well worth it. My number 3, I hope Joe doesn't kill me for, and that is Revenge of the Nerds. I know how he feels about when nerd culture basically gets turned into a minstrel show.
It is, but it knows that it's, stupid. But no, I'm fine with it. That's fine. It's a classic.
Fair enough.
People like Red.
I just thought this one was so completely off the wall in terms of being a college party movie. I couldn't resist putting it on this list. It's as I mentioned, quite possibly the most cliche interpretation of nerds, but it plays off for so many of the movie's best scenes. And if being a nerd is wrong, I don't ever want to be right. Sorry, couldn't resist. Number 2 is Road Trip. It's not really so much a college party movie, but a full array of them. And yes, it's a raunchy quest to retrieve a piece of incriminating evidence, but it just is hilariously entertaining. And while I would happily argue it's quite possibly the lowest of the lowbrow for 20th century cinema, it's still ridiculously funny.
I never saw it.
Really?
Is Tom Green in that?
Yes. Yep. Yes, quite possibly one of his best roles.
That would be why.
No, no.
I've come around on him a little bit.
Honey, would you like
but
some sausage?
At the time, I absolutely loathed Tom Green.
Well,
that's when I paid for
Dan,
movies, so
you're not alone.
Not alone, right? Everybody hates him.
No, I mean...
I don't...
Well...
That was like when the Bum song was out. Your bum is on my lips. Remember that song? What a terrible, terrible everything. But I'm fine with him now, because, I mean, obviously, it's not like anybody talks about him.
No, except when they want to talk about the worst movie ever made.
Like, whenever I see him on talk shows and stuff. Freddy got fingered, yeah. Whenever I see him on talk shows, like, I'm fine with him. He's, whatever. But at the time, I hated him, so I avoided Road Trip at all costs. All right, Joe, what is your number 1 on the college party circuit?
My number 1 is actually The Rules of Attraction.
Oh.
Which is actually more of a drama-ish thing, but it does involve a lot of hijinks and antics, but it's kind of a dark comedy. It actually has some really serious moments, and it gets pretty dark, and it has a really interesting plot, and I think the one reason I really like this movie a lot, and it stands out for me, is because I think it has, like, one of the most tragic love triangles ever, and I won't spoil it ever, but it's got, like, literally... the whole movie is about unrequited love. Like, and it's one of the best interpretations of it I've ever seen. And I like the fact that it doesn't have, like, exactly a nice, happy, wrapped-up ending. And fun fact, it's also following a character who is related to another franchise. I believe it's Patrick Bateman.
That's correct.
It's actually his younger brother's life in college, so... American Psycho.
Oh,
it's actually in the same universe, so...
No kidding.
Fun fact, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Well, my number 1, I would say, is probably in a universe all its own, and that is Old School.
Oh, wow.
Probably in my top 2 or 3 Will Ferrell movies. Very, very funny combo of gentlemen. I think they all have great chemistry together, and I've seen this one more times, certainly, than anything else on my top 5, and it just never gets old. It's always funny.
You guys want to know something?
Huh?
Never seen it.
It's a good one, Joe.
Yeah, it's one of those movies I heard a lot about. I just never saw it.
It's quite funny. It is a little long, though. Justin's right about that. Justin?
Well, no surprise here. Number 1, Animal House.
Yeah, it kind of figures.
There's no way to top it. It's just the quintessential college party movie. It just really showed just how hilarious John Belushi was before his tragic ending. There's just so many great, memorable scenes and one-liners. I honestly do not know where to start in terms of talking about how this really deserves number 1.
I'm fine with that. Good number 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic go-to number 1, I would say, for...
I believe...
really the template for all college movies to follow.
I think Justin put it well. I mean, the quintessential.
Yeah, it really is, for sure. All right, well, now we have our triple feature of older films. And before we start that, I do want to put out the call for our old classic slot for our listener's choice, which will be coming up in just a couple of weeks. So if there is a movie you would like us to review here on the show, the only rule is it must be more than 2 years old for us to consider it an old classic. And let us know on the Facebook group, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, where you can see our 5-word reviews every week leading up to that week's podcast. But feel free to post it there, or if you want to put it on the comment section of our YouTube channel, that would be great too. We'd love to hear from you. But first is our new classic for the week, and that is Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. In the latest installment of the popular animated franchise, Alex the Lion and Marty the Zebra, voiced by Ben Stiller and Chris Rock respectively, and their friends, currently in Europe, are trying to get back to their New York zoo home. They make it to Monte Carlo to get help from their penguin and chimpanzee friends, and not much further, as a plane they used to escape casino security crashes nearby. They discover a circus train there and pretend to be a traveling circus themselves, and team up with each other to travel to Rome and London, and eventually back to New York City. Some of the real circus animals, like Gia the jaguar and Stefano the sea lion, voiced by Jessica Chastain and Martin Short, take to the new group. However, ringleader Vitali, a tiger voiced in another Russian accent by Bryan Cranston, we just talked about Cold Comes the Night last week, has some serious doubts. Meanwhile, a French animal control woman voiced by Frances McDormand is tailing them all the way, trying to capture Marty for her wall of animal heads. Since the explanation for what's happening in this movie is so involved, I'll make the synopsis short. I'm not a fan of this film series in general, and this is actually the only one that I enjoyed, and it's largely due to the story and new cast livening up the jokes and giving the animals new creatures to play off of. I like the penguins a lot, and Alex and Marty, but David Schwimmer as Giraffe Melman and Jada Pinkett Smith as Hippo Gloria are not engaging in the least and never have been. So in previous installments, when it was really just the main four, half of them were unappealing. Here there's so much more going on, and it works like gangbusters. Because of Marty's Afro Circus idea, the film is also bright and fun for kids of all ages. I give Madagascar 3 a B+. Joe, I know you didn't love this one, so I'd like to hear from you first.
Oh, okay.
You had not seen this one before. Justin and I had.
I believe I've seen the first one a long time ago and part of the second one.
Okay.
But I think I saw both those probably about 5 years ago.
Yeah, 2 was probably 5 years ago by this point.
Yeah, so I think I saw them like right on top of each other.
I think they get better as they go along.
That's actually what I've generally heard.
Yeah.
I will admit I wasn't super engaged when I was watching them. There was like other stuff going on, but they were just kind of on.
Right.
And I remember thinking that they were okay.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, I do think it is also probably the best of them. That I remember. At least it was a little more interesting. But in regards to Madagascar 3, colorful animation and sweeping music are easily the best thing about this movie. It provided lots of pleasing visuals to keep the kids occupied. The humor is also decent as well. There are some jokes that lend well to both adults and kids. Other than that, though, it is really pretty average. The characters are likable enough, though there isn't really enough to make them stand out. I think that without the previous installments, the audience would be have a less of an ability to connect with them very easily. I thought that was leaving a lot open to previous sequels, like it doesn't stand very well on its own. The side characters are actually more entertaining here than the leads. The story is alright, though it takes a while to draw you in. The voice acting is also, has some pretty good spots as well. Overall, though, I would say it's a nice flick to keep, the kids happy, kill some time, but it really doesn't have too much to make it stand out and last as like a great child classic. And I really teetered on like C+ for this one. I mean, I might leave it at a B- for the kids, but I'd say for everyone else it's like a C+.
Okay. Justin? Madagascar 3.
Prior to this film and seeing all new releases for Film Fanatics, I never had much of an urge to watch the Madagascar movies. I saw most of the original, and what I saw I truly, truly loathed, and parts of the second, but the third seemed to finally warrant my attention. This was largely thanks to its wonderfully wacky story that does not hold back, and some visual eye candy. However, the best thing about Madagascar 3 does not necessarily involve the current leads, but rather the new additions. While the militaristic side characters that are the penguins are comedy gold and well-deserving of their spin-off of TV series and eventual film,
It's good.
the new characters are truly, to lovingly borrow Dan's passion for puns, the main attraction.
Like a lion's mane.
No!
Or main attraction of the circus.
Oh.
I got it. Okay, multiple puns.
That was good.
Frances McDormand is absolute dynamite as the gang's most formidable antagonist thus far, as well as Cranston, Chastain, and Short as the circus animals that the four joined forces with. Overall, this is to be the final film of the overall Madagascar franchise. They put their best foot forward to offer up a loud and crazy finish, and I give it a B.
I think it would be a nice way to end the series, because it really is good. And it sort of wraps everything up. I mean, they finally made it home. Let's, end it there.
Yeah.
And really, the voice talent of the new characters, I didn't know any of them were the person. I mean, Martin Short has 1,000 voices anyway, so that's not surprising. Jessica Chastain, no idea that was her. Bryan Cranston, no idea that was him. Frances McDormand, I don't really know well enough, to know, but she was probably my favorite part of that whole movie.
Well,
I thought she did such a good job.
What do you expect? I mean, it's a great cast.
It is a great cast, but I guess the leads of the 4 main leads,
They stand out so much.
well, they just do their voices. I mean, they don't. None of them put on another voice.
It's like basically, hey, it's Ben Stiller the lion.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
It's Chris Rock.
It's
the
Chris
zebra.
Rock as the
Yeah.
zebra. And I mean, I can't say that's the worst thing in the world. It's not like Tom Hanks puts on some crazy accent for Woody.
No,
But I mean,
but I would argue he kind of.
well, he puts on a
I
little
think-
southern drawl, I guess.
No, I mean, but no, he honestly he is Tom Hanks, but I feel
Right.
like he gets so absorbed in that character that I do think of him as Woody first,
Okay.
personally.
Right.
I like Tim Allen a lot, but I see him really as Buzz Lightyear. Like,
Yeah, that is true.
You know what I mean?
They,
Like,
they really.
they-
well, I guess it's more of a. They don't change their voice, but they
change-
embody the spirit
yeah,
of the character.
like as opposed to just playing like how
Right.
like Tim Allen, he would just be like, okay, I'm Tim Allen. I'm in this movie,
Right.
But when he's Buzz Lightyear, you can tell he's trying to at least
That
be
is true.
a little more subtle.
Yep.
Which is why the Toy Story movies are so great.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say the same probably for Mike Wazowski and Sully for the Monster series.
There you go.
Yeah. But right, when you watch Madagascar, it's just like,
that's Chris Rock.
David Schwimmer doing a giraffe. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't they the worst part, though? The giraffe and the hippo? I mean, they didn't give them much to do in 3, which was the wisest choice the franchise has made.
I think
Probably.
I don't
Yeah.
really remember them well enough in the first 2 movies. I thought they were okay,
Yeah.
passable, I guess.
But yeah, all the side characters are great in this. Well, since we're on the subject of animated films, let's move into our old classic. Joe brought Mulan for that, and he's going to tell us about that.
It's pretty, nice little smooth segue, isn't it?
Yeah.
About it. It's like animated,
What a segue.
Slaminated. Moving on to Mulan, a 1998 animated musical action comedy drama film.
That is true.
I mean, it was like I saw that. What a definition! Produced by Disney Animation and based on the legend of Hua Mulan. It stars Ming-Na Wen as Mulan, as well as Eddie Murphy as Mushu, her spiritual dragon sidekick. When the Huns invade China, the Emperor calls on one man from every family to fight. When Mulan's father is forced to enlist, Mulan takes his place by disguising herself as a man. She must prevent herself from being discovered while trying to uphold her family's honor. Her adventure leads her to being the only thing that may save China from the Huns. Mulan is one of the last great films of the Disney Renaissance, and it has some of the same trappings of the others. It is a dynamic story aimed pretty evenly at adults and kids. The animation is gorgeous. The main character is a strong female lead, which is relatively rare, and the humor is equally on par with the dramatic moments. I would argue some parts are a little heavy for kids, but they are few and far between. The only real problem with Mulan is that the villain is frightening, but rather underdeveloped, and the orchestral score, Dan pointed this out to me, surpasses most of the actual songs, which are relatively few as well. Still, Mulan is a very well done piece of 90s Disney, and one of the better movies of my childhood, and I give it an A-.
Nice. Justin, how about you? Mulan.
Disney's always had their princess narratives, but Mulan took the story in a different, much darker direction. While Mulan's journey begins with her having to find a husband, the audience sees her as more of a person trying to be herself and just cannot. In contrast to the other attempts of when Disney has tried to do this, Mulan hits his home without being preachy and staying true to the wartime narrative. That said, while this may seem dark, though animated beautifully as such, Mulan adds some great side characters and several great one-liners, many of which delivered by Murphy.
Speaking of actors that kind of just play themselves.
Well, that is true.
But
it
it's Eddie
works.
Murphy. You
Yeah,
can't get
it
it
works.
wrong.
This results in a film that stays true to its roots, with the stakes raised higher and higher as the film goes on, but still keeping it entertaining for family audiences with a couple of really good song numbers. In Walt Disney Pictures' animated portfolio, Mulan is easily one of the most unique in the bunch, and I give it an A.
All right, well, there is about a decade's worth of Disney animated films that I have missed. Being about 10 years older than my colleagues here, I was already in college and beyond when films like Hercules, Pocahontas, The Emperor's New Groove, and others came out. And I didn't restart my Disney properties until I started working at a video store and Meet the Robinsons came out. Mulan was in that category that I missed. So, Joe, I was very happy that you let me get this one for the old classic this month. Even for a Disney film, it is pretty dark. We've talked previously on this show about movies like The Lion King being dark. This is right up there. In today's market, there's no doubt it would be rated PG. It's got some classic Disney tropes like importance of family, female empowerment, a funny sidekick, voiced by a funny comedian, and song selections to ease some of the more tense scenes. On the whole, all of it works very well. Murphy, as you guys both mentioned, is absolutely hilarious as the dragon, though I'm not sure why the sidekick needs a sidekick in the cricket.
And another sidekick.
And another sidekick. Joe, you kind of touched on that in Rio 2, because there was a lot of sidekick overkill in that one, too.
I'll briefly touch on that. I don't want to speak anything weak against Mulan, but you can always tell that that's kind of when writers are feeling a little nervous about when certain things can stand on their own. And this actually happened in the 90s with Disney. You'll notice movies like Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, there'll be multiple sidekicks. And whether or not you like them or not is fine, but it's something that kind of happens a lot. And
yeah, it strikes me as a bit unnecessary.
though did you like the cricket? I like the cricket.
Yeah, he was okay.
Can't really hurt.
I feel like Disney already perfected the cricket with Jiminy.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they needed another famous cricket sidekick. But
No, I suppose not.
obviously, it's great visually. The themes work very well, and Mulan's character is well developed and well voiced by Ming-Na Wen. I just wish the songs were better. As Joe sort of mentioned, I had a little bit of a problem with that. I didn't really care too much for any of them except for the opener. But for me, overall, Mulan gets an A-, on par with some of the big ones.
I think it's in the upper echelon. I do.
I would say so. I mean, I feel like the 90s... Well, as I said, I sort of missed half of the 90s, but the early 90s are some of my favorites.
I'll tell you, Dan.
Beauty and the Beast, Lion King.
The 90s is considered the peak for Disney.
Okay.
I mean, hence the Disney Renaissance.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Though, I am interested. We'll have to save it, but if you thought Mulan was dark, I guess you'll have to be excited when I decide to run, Hunchback.
I've heard Hunchback is, super dark.
You'll be like... Yeah, you'll be probably throwing another ratings fit again with that.
Okay. I don't doubt it, because I've heard that.
No, it's my favorite, so...
Really?
It
of
is.
all the Disney movies?
It is.
Very good. I pointed this out to you gentlemen, and you like the character anyway, but the old woman, voiced by June Foray, who, by the way, is in her 90s and still doing voice work.
Oh, wow.
She is one of the most classic voice actresses of all time, from Rocky the Squirrel in Bullwinkle Show to voices on the Bugs Bunny cartoons. It was so awesome. I recognized her voice immediately, and she has some of the best lines. She only appears to bookend the movie,
she's hilarious.
She's hilarious.
One thing I liked that was kind of true around this time is that for whatever reason, Disney wanted to touch on different cultures and different parts of the world. I mean, Lion King was Africa. The Native Americans did Pocahontas. Hunchback of Notre Dame was France. Hercules, Greece, and then Mulan here we have China. And with each of these movies, they try to kind of at least, pay some homage to part of history, a great story, and the culture. And you could see stylistically they did that with Mulan.
Mm-hmm.
They with the paintings.
Very much.
The music was very, Chinese.
Yeah.
And one thing I liked about it that was cool is that most of the cast are famous Asian actors or voice actors.
That is true.
I didn't recognize all of them, but I noticed most of the cast was Asian. And even people like George Takei had a minor role as head ancestor, which I didn't pick up on until years later. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right on that.
A nice little thing, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think they definitely wanted to branch out in that era. I don't know if that's due to the persistent,
White
Disney racist rumors.
Probably,
that keep popping up. But
personally, I think whether it's overcompensating, I think, and admittedly with different films, there's definitely some mixed issues there. I think that it's good that at least at one point they were really trying.
Right.
And now people have kind of gotten back in with the Disney race thing. My girlfriend always talks about how apparently Frozen's been getting a lot of flack for, being mostly having white characters, even though it takes place in Scandinavia.
Right. I don't know what they want from from Disney.
I mean,
first of all,
come on.
They had an African American princess a few years ago with Princess and the Frog.
Yeah.
So, which is a great movie.
Apparently, some people had a hard time with the fact that she was a poor person, even though it was in the 20s and she was
and it was
black.
the Great Depression,
and
right?
and the Great Depression, the fact that she had a business or trying to make a business was
Right.
really impressive. So you'd think she's adhering to... Okay, we're getting off topic.
The bottom line is, some people will never be happy. And if Disney's way of trying to placate them is to do these different styles or different ethnicities, hey, that's great. Because Mulan's a great movie.
I thought so.
You know? So I'm fine with that.
All right. Well, I'm glad you liked it then.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it, and eventually I'll get to all of them. I'm trying to collect all of them on DVD and Blu-ray. So at some point, they're up to 53 now. Frozen was number 53 in the list. I'd like to just watch them all and, see how they've changed over the years and that kind of thing.
There's a couple I've been wanting to run that you have, so...
Nice.
Probably some Disneys I can get out of here. At least the ones I really like.
Very good. Well, hopefully we'll get to some of those. All right, finally in our show is the Oscar A to Z, and this week that is All the King's Men. It's a film from 1949 that won some of the biggies: Best Picture, Best Actor for Broderick Crawford, and Best Supporting Actress for Mercedes McCambridge. It was also nominated for Director, Screenplay, and Film Editing. Justin, tell us about All the King's Men.
Jack Burton, played by John Ireland, is a newspaper journalist searching for a story when he gets word about Willie Stark, played by Broderick Crawford, a true man of the people. However, when some of Willie's corruption starts to come to light, Jack finds himself torn in supporting his candidate. This is a great film not just in terms of acting, but also in terms of the cultural zeitgeist of 1949. Films made by Frank Capra and others showed the power of politics in a positive way. However, in contrast to All the King's Men, it dares to look at the corruption and the inner workings that allow people to become so easily persuaded. It doesn't make for the most pleasant viewing experience, but thanks to Ireland and Crawford and showing the uglier sides of politics, it's both suspenseful and slightly crushing at the exact same time. Unfortunately, the finale is a bit abrupt, as well as a recurring theme for me this podcast, preachy. But despite this, All the King's Men is a well-acted political drama, still poignant to this day, and I give it an A.
This film is easily one of the early examples of a really gritty political drama with complex characters, a great story, and pristine performances led by Crawford. It's easy to see why it was nominated for an editing Oscar as well, because not only are the montages well done, but the original cut was over 250 minutes long. So to cut it down by less than half and have it be so cohesive is a feat. Its themes are more relevant today than probably even back then, which is why it lent itself so easily to the 2006 Sean Penn remake. It's a touch heavy-handed and obviously borrows its style from Citizen Kane, among others, but still, it holds up better than most of the older Oscar films we've seen, and I give it an A-. Joe, what did you think?
This one has a very compelling, politically charged story that is very honest and dark for its time. The performances are great, some of the editing is very slick, and the characters are complex enough to keep our interest. It seems very reminiscent of such films with big ideas like Citizen Kane. Few movies of the time were probably as keen on the corruption of the politician, even one with good ideals. However, the film does have some pacing issues, and it does drag a bit at the middle. Still, it has to be really worthy of its many nominations, and I give it a B+. Not bad.
Very good.
Very good.
I couldn't believe that when I read that the original cut was 250 minutes.
Hey.
And the director refused to edit it down. He was like, I can't edit my own work. So they brought in an editor, and he sliced it together really, really well.
That editing team.
All-star work.
Yeah. I'm surprised it didn't win for the editing that year. I don't know what won.
It didn't win?
No, it was just nominated for it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. What won that year? Do you know?
I don't know.
Because I mean, like, I
it's
feel
probably
like
something we've never heard of.
I'm just saying. I think for editing was probably the strongest thing about it. I thought
It really was. The montages were great.
montages.
Oh my goodness, yes.
A movie called Champion. I never heard of it.
Is it a sports movie? Just curious.
It was up for best cinematography as well, and
So style over substance for that one. Always got to give somebody the leg up.
best screenplay,
Maybe not.
best supporting actor.
Oh my.
Kirk Douglas was best actor.
Hello.
Okay, there,
Nominee anyway.
there you go.
Okay, looks like a romance, not a sports movie.
Okay.
Although he has his shirt off, he might be a boxer. Recounts the struggles of boxer Mitch Kelly
told
fighting his
you.
own demons.
Oscar loves their
That
sports
is
movies
for sure.
and boxing. Cinderella Man once again.
Yep, it rears its ugly head. All right, well, pretty good grades all around for all the King's Men. Nice to end on another high note with the Oscars.
Finally, we got some good
Indeed.
ones.
Yeah. Well, that will just about do it for the show this week. Joe, big summer movies out. I'm sure you'll be talking about some of those on your own channel.
Yeah, definitely.
X-Men coming up, Godzilla.
Godzilla probably next. I bet Justin and I might even do our own little mini-sode. And yeah, I'll probably talk about probably all the big heavy hitters. I mean, X-Men, Maleficent maybe. You know,
Nice.
some of the next ones. I'll be talking about some of the craptastic ones.
Transformers.
And definitely Turtles.
Yeah.
That looks really terrible.
I know.
All right, well, if you have not subscribed yet and you are a frequent listener of the program here,
Subscribe.
do it, man. Yeah, why not? And, of course, like I mentioned, the Facebook group earlier, you can always join that, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And hopefully you've been catching our 5-word reviews there. We post them every week for the major new releases, and our Twitter feed as well, at Film Fanatics Pod. All right, we'll see you back here next week, and thanks for listening. Bye.